I'll ask you to jump in.
Hi, again, I think Claire did a good job. I'm Karina Richters. I'm the Supervisor of Environmental Sustainability and Climate Change for the city. And we have our climate change action plans, which include trying to promote EV vehicles. And that's why this is such an important topic for tonight, as the city is moving towards um, putting some things in place that will actually help everybody and support everybody's decisions.
Awesome. So again, just to provide a little bit of context as to why the city and IRCA are hosting this jointly this evening, we know that our climate is changing. We've seen evidence of this from over the last few years. We've seen extensive flooding in the region from rainstorms, from shoreline events. We're seeing ticks, we're seeing algal blooms. Farmers are challenged with planting every year or droughts. So we're certainly seeing a change in our climate here. And so some of the work that Karina and myself are tasked with is both to adapt to the climate as well as to mitigate our greenhouse gases. So we know, there's no climate change uh, presentation is complete without a nice graph from NASA. But scientific evidence for global warming or for warming of the climate system is unequivocal. Evidence found in ice cores, glaciers, tree rings, ocean sediments, coral reefs, sedimentary rocks show that the Earth's climate responds to changes in greenhouse gas levels. And the evidence reveals that current warming is occurring roughly 10 times faster than the average rate of ice age recovery warming. And amazingly, we've actually known about this for many, many, many years. We've actually known about it since the 1850s. But this is a great little article here from 1912. It's like from a Popular Mechanics article in Australia about how furnaces of the world are now burning 2 billion tons of coal a year. And when this is burned, uniting with oxygen, it adds about 7 billion tons of carbon dioxide to the atmosphere yearly. This tends to make the air a more effective blanket for the Earth and to raise its temperature. The effect may be considerable in a few centuries. And of course, we're seeing the effects much sooner than that because of the technological revolution, the industrial revolution. So we're certainly seeing, the evidence is compelling for climate change. So what some communities are doing is they are making what are called energy plans. And the city of Windsor completed an energy plan in 2017 that was approved by council. The county of Essex is doing one currently, and this plan is going to county council next month for approval. And an energy plan is really more than just a climate plan. Yes, it aims to reduce greenhouse gases, but it also looks at cost. It looks at creating green jobs, attracting new businesses, increasing energy security, all of these things. And we know that we're part of the climate solution, and our choices are part of the climate solution as well. And so that's what these energy plans do. They bring the community together to have these conversations about personal choices and about what we want to see in our future community in terms of energy use and greenhouse gas reductions. So this is just a small slide of what we know so far about greenhouse gas emissions in Windsor and Essex. So this is our data, County of Essex combined with the City of Windsor. Together, we emit in 1 year approximately over 4 million tons of greenhouse gases. And you can see it's broken down by sector here. Transportation accounts for 33%. So that's a huge chunk, and that's personal transportation, that's small vehicles, trucking. This is a range of transportation, but certainly, the way we get around and our everyday personal decisions are a large chunk of our own emissions in this region. So when we put together a community energy plan, you also put together strategies on how to get to net zero by 2050, which is the Paris Agreement Canada targets. So net zero by 2050. You need a set of strategies, and one of those set of strategies is always going to be focused on transportation. And so both the City of Windsor and the County of Essex both have electric vehicle targets within their community energy plans. So I'm actually, if Karina's still there, I see she turned off her camera, but I'm going to turn it over to her just to provide a little bit of information about the energy plan targets in the City of Windsor Community Energy Plan.
Thanks, Claire. So in the Community Energy Plan, which was approved by City Council in 2017, there is a target to basically transition at least 10% of our vehicles that we drive every day to EV vehicles. That would result in about 40,000 tons reduced, which is pretty significant. We also have other strategies to deal with our corporate fleet, which we are converting some of those electric vehicles as well. However, in November 2019, the City of Windsor declared a climate emergency, and we're looking at how do we accelerate the actions? And part of that solution is actually to increase that EV targets from 10% to about 30%. And obviously, since 2017, there's been a lot of exciting news in the EV market, and I think our speakers are going to speak to some of that. So we think that this is actually a very reasonable expectation for our community to be able to reach that 30%, which again will help us reduce those emissions from transportation.
I'm on mute. So 4 years later, when we went to do our plan, the County of Essex plan, which again is going for approval next month, in the 4 years between the City of Windsor's plan and the County of Essex, you know, there's a much stronger drive, I think, from the community to see stronger targets. So in fact, whereas Karina's targets are 10 and 30%, ours is actually 80%. We're hoping that we can see 80% of our light duty vehicles as electric within the next 20 years. And we think that this may be doable. Certainly, you know, the federal targets for zero emission vehicles and reaching 10% of light duty vehicles by sales by the year 2025. They're suggesting 30 by 2030, 100% by 2040. So we think things are changing rapidly and quickly, and we're hoping that this is sort of a tipping point that we're seeing right now. So I'm going to throw it back to Karina, who's going to just talk a little bit about what they're doing in their current plan and some of the new infrastructure that the city is installing before we turn it over to our panelists.
Yeah, thank you. So, and I think this is really worthy information for people considering electric vehicles. And I'm sure we're going to get into that conversation about range anxiety and other aspects that kind of have people have in the back of their mind. But one thing new this year is the City of Windsor has received funding, and we'll be installing a number of community chargers. You can see they're listed here. So at some of our like busy arenas and our parking lots, you'll be able to charge your vehicles in those locations. So it's just part of what the City of Windsor is trying to do to facilitate this transition to electric vehicles and supporting our community.
Karina and I will stick around for the rest of the session, obviously, and so we can answer any questions you might have about those energy plans. But at this point, I'm going to turn it over to the real experts who are on the meeting today. And I'm so pleased to be able to welcome Sean. Sean Hart is the Vice President of the EV Society, the National EV Society of Canada. And he is going to share a few slides, give us the basics, the 101 on electric vehicles. And I will turn it over to him.
Thanks so much, Claire. Great to be here with everybody. Let me share my screen so I can start my presentation here. Can you see that? Yep. Okay, great. Yeah, so I'm going to just give a really quick presentation on a little bit about Electric Vehicle Society and EVs in general, and then hopefully we can get quickly to some of your questions. So as Claire mentioned, I'm the vice president with Electric Vehicle Society, which is a Canada-wide organization, and I'm in Bell River myself and participate with the local Windsor Essex chapter. So what is EV Society? We are a not-for-profit organization. We're made up of EV owners that are helping that transition to electric vehicles. As I mentioned, we're a Canada-wide organization with local chapters throughout Canada. We have around about 30 chapters and affiliates, we call them, throughout Canada. We're funded by our members. We have a $30 a year membership fee. We also have a free tier as well for anyone who wants to participate without being a full member. We are entirely run by volunteers. There's no paid staff. We don't take any government grants at this point. So we're really a grassroots organization made up of electric vehicle owners. Why do we exist? And how did we come about? And really, there's a really simple answer kind of at the key to that, and that is that EVs are better, and that's why like we're made up of EV owners, because once someone's made the switch from a gas car to an electric car, the light bulb kind of goes off, and you start to realize, okay, actually this car is pretty cool, and I now understand why it's better to drive electric. And they're better for a few reasons. Environmental is obvious, and that's why we're here today. But they're also better from a financial perspective. They're better for your piggy bank. They're cheaper to operate and cheaper to maintain. And they're just more fun. They're more fun vehicles to drive. So we'll get into some of those details. So EV Society's background in Windsor Essex goes back to 2013, and this picture is actually from 2013, just after I got my very first electric car, which was a Nissan Leaf, and I did not know a single other EV owner or plug-in car owner in the world, so I kind of took a leap of faith and kind of jumped in blind. But I was looking for some other EV owners to connect with, and came across this meeting at Green Sun Rising. And this picture is probably of every single plug-in car that existed in Windsor Essex in 2013. I'm pretty confident of that. But once I talked to other owners and realized that we all love our cars, I thought maybe we should have a group that we can get together and talk about our cars. So I started up the Windsor Essex EV Association in 2013. It was called WEAVE at the time, and that was our logo. And then as we grew and started to coordinate with other EV associations in Ontario, we became part of EV Society and became a chapter of EV Society in 2016. At the moment, we have around 170 Windsor Essex-based members, and before disrupted everything, we were doing around 4 to 5 events per year where we bring our vehicles, owners would bring their vehicles to events, and we could show off our cars. Some of the things that we do, we attend public events, like I mentioned. We have a Canada-wide webinar, monthly webinar, where we have industry experts come in and talk about the EV industry. We love to share news on our social media and in our monthly newsletter. We also work with governments at all levels, municipal, provincial, and federal, to help bring in EV friendly policies and to advocate on behalf of EV owners and drivers. And we also engage with industry participants. So I'm going to go to a very fundamental question, which is, what exactly is an EV anyway? Because we do get this question, and it can be confusing for folks. So when we talk about an EV, we talk about two real types of vehicles. One is the battery electric vehicle, or BEV, and the other is the plug-in hybrid, or PHEV. And some of the differences between the two. So if I start with a battery electric, a BEV is purely electric. There's no gas whatsoever. There's no gas engine. There's no gas tank. It's just an electric motor and a battery that drives the car. BEVs tend to be able to charge very fast using what's called a DC fast charger, or DCFC. And this is like the gas station model. So if you're going on a long trip, you can charge up relatively quickly and then keep going. So like Petro-Canada has been putting a lot of these in at their gas stations. So it's that's kind of the gas station model. You can also charge these things at home as well. They tend to have a range of, on the low end, around the 200 kilometer mark for kind of current vehicles. On the high end, 600, sometimes a bit more than 600 kilometers. So it depends on the model, but obviously the more expensive vehicles tend to have longer ranges. But depending on what your needs are, some people don't need a really high range vehicle. So depending on what your needs are, you can normally find an electric car that'll work. Another kind of feature of the BEVs is they're easier and cheaper to maintain than the plug-in hybrids. And the main reason is because a plug-in hybrid also has a gas engine. So a plug-in hybrid has both electric and gas fuel. So it can run purely on electric, but then when the battery runs out, it can switch over and run on gas as well. They tend to max out at what we call level 2 charging or medium speed charging, and that's what you would get like in your garage or like at Devonshire Mall. And the reason they don't have the high speed chargers is because you always have that gas backup. So if you're going on a long trip and your battery runs out, you can just continue running on gas, just like a normal gas vehicle. And then so they tend to have a range of in the 30 to 80 kilometers, depending on the model. So they tend to be, lower range. They've got smaller batteries than the pure electric cars, again, because they can switch over to gas if they need to. But they do drive first on electricity. So it's not like the gas engine's coming on and off all the time. Generally, they drive primarily on electricity until the battery runs out. And then once the battery runs out, then the gas engine will kick in. And of course, they can fill up at regular, gas stations, right? So that's one of their kind of unique features. With both types of EVs, all of them can plug in to charge, and plugging into charge is always cheaper than running on gas, and I'll talk about that in a second. They all have advanced lithium-based batteries in them, and so think about your cell phone, only way better. The batteries are designed to last a really long time, the life of the car. So they're kind of a similar technology to your cell phone, but a lot more durable. And they all have decreased environmental footprint when you compare them to a gasoline car. Although the pure battery electrics do have an even lower footprint because they don't have that gas option. So I'm going to go through 3 quick did you know questions, and then we'll turn it over to the rest of the panel. So the first did you know question is, did you know that electricity is cheaper than gas? This is something that comes up a lot. We get this question a lot because if you follow the media, you tend to hear the message that electricity is expensive. In Ontario, electricity is expensive. And that might be true if you compare it to some other provinces or jurisdictions. But when you're comparing it to gasoline to run a car, electricity is actually really cheap. And I like to show this example of what a fuel price would be. So if for gas to be at the same price as electricity for driving a car, the gas would have to be selling for 30 cents per liter, basically. So imagine if there was a gas station in Windsor that was advertising gas at 30 cents per liter. There'd be lineups down the road. It would be national news. It would be a big deal. But the fact is, anyone with an electric car, that's what they're paying right now. So it's really cheap to fuel an electric car on electricity. And the reason for that is that electric motors are they're very efficient. About 80% of the electricity goes to driving the vehicle, compared to gasoline, where about 20% of the energy of gasoline goes to driving the vehicle, and the rest is actually wasted through heat. So gasoline engines are very inefficient compared to electric motors. Also, electricity is really easy to produce. I mean, we see the wind turbines and solar panels, and in Ontario, most of our electricity is made here. The electricity is easy to transport, compared to gasoline. And electric cars can fuel up at home, which is convenient and cost effective. Gas stations have overhead. They have to pay employees. They have to maintain equipment. But most electric cars owners are just charging, in their driveway or in their garage. So you don't have that kind of overhead. So all of those things kind of combine to make electricity very cheap to run on. So my next did you know question is, did you know that electric cars are actually more fun to drive? in the early days, electric cars used to have this misconception they were like, glorified golf carts, and that's no longer the case. And I think most people know that at this point. But you get instant torque in an electric car because there's no delay between putting your foot down and the acceleration that you get. It's basically everything's operating at light speed. We're just talking about electrons, so it's really, really fast. Just to give you an example of that, one of the fastest production cars, accelerating production cars in the world is the Tesla Model S, which is an entirely electric car. And although it's an expensive car to get the performance model, you're looking at $114,000. But if you compare that to a $3.4 million Bugatti Chiron supercar, the Tesla will out accelerate it, and the Tesla is a four-door sedan. So just to give you an example of the capability of an electric car compared to a gasoline car. The other nice thing is the batteries in an electric car, they tend to be low. They're at the floor of the car, so it gives it a low center of gravity, which helps with the handling. So they corner well and things like that. And they're also really, really quiet. It can be almost disconcerting the first time you kind of accelerate in an electric car and you don't hear any noise coming from, you don't hear the rev of the engine. It seems weird at first, but you get used to it pretty quickly, and it's pretty nice. And then my last did you know point here is, did you know that yes, EVs are better for the environment? I mean, that's kind of why we're here. But that's another question that does come up. People hear about there's mining associated with batteries, and there's and that you can use coal to make electricity and things like that. But as a matter of fact, first of all, in Ontario, most of our electricity is non-polluting. It comes from hydro and nuclear and wind and solar, and that helps to make it very low polluting, a very low polluting electricity supply. The other thing is that EV batteries, they last the life of the car, and at the end of their life, they can be recycled. A lot of the material that goes into an EV battery can be recovered. Unlike gasoline, once you burn it, it's gone. Also, people forget that creating gasoline is quite an energy-intensive process. Going from oil to gasoline takes a lot of energy and actually produces a lot of greenhouse gases just to get from the oil well to the pump. And that's even before you've burnt the gas in your car. So that really contributes to the environmental footprint of gasoline. Also, local air quality improves when you're driving an EV because you don't have any tailpipe emissions. So there's nothing going into the local air that contributes to smog and things like that. So that can be great from a health perspective. But the one thing I always try and remind people is we're not trying to pretend that EVs are the magic bullet to the environmental issues. It's always better if you're not driving a car in the first place. So if you can use a bike or if you can use public transportation, that's always the best option. But if you have to drive a car, driving an electric car is significantly better from an environmental perspective than driving a gasoline car. Okay, so that's my spiel. I'll turn it over for questions. I'll just leave you with a few points on the screen to kind of get your mind thinking. But at this point, I'd like to introduce the rest of the panel. So what I'm going to do is just ask the panelists I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to ask the panelists to unmute themselves and then introduce themselves. So hold on, let me just stop sharing my screen. And when you introduce yourself, can you just say what car you drive and what you love, one thing you love about your car, and just keep it to one thing because we need to let people ask questions. So I'm going to start with Mary. Mary, if you can unmute yourself.
Hey everybody, I'm Mary Guthrie. I'm a retired IT professional, just to give you a sense of my situation right now. I have a 2019 Chevrolet Bolt EV. That's Bolt with a B, not Volt with a V. And the thing there are so many things I love about my car. It's very hard to just pick one. So what I'll tell you is having my Bolt EV is the most fun to drive, I think, of any vehicle I've ever owned. The Bolt does 0 to 60 in 6.5 seconds, and I have a heavy foot, so I really enjoy that aspect of the car hugely. And then you're going to hear a whole bunch of other cool things about having an EV when you speak to the other folks on the panel.
Great, thanks very much, Mary. Michael, how about you go next?
Yeah, good evening. My name is Michael Schneider. I drive a Chevy Volt. I've been driving electrically since 2013, about the same time as Sean started driving electrically. And so I'm on my second Volt already, because I had a really good trade-in deal and 0% financing from GM. So I ended up trading up a little bit, but still kept the same vehicle. And so what I really like about the vehicle is how dependable they are. And like I say, like Mary said, they're much fun to drive. And I have at approximately 250,000 kilometers that I have driven by now in the last 9 years, so to speak. And the one good thing that I have as well is because I take advantage of a solar system that I actually installed on my home, that I don't even pay for the electricity and I drive on sunshine, so to speak, which is actually even better than the 30 cents. So very economical and just a great around vehicle. And I would never drive another gasoline powered engine after this.
Awesome. Thanks, Michael. And Pino, over to you.
Thank you. My name is Pino Mastriani. I've been driving the Chevy Volt since 2012 and a Pacifica plug-in hybrid since 2017. My favorite thing is got to be the reliability of both of the vehicles that we're driving.
Okay, yeah, great, Pino. Now, Pino, did you want to share some stuff before we go over to questions?
Yeah, let's cover my 3 subjects. I'll try to be as quick as possible. Okay, so first, it's going to be local EV manufacturing, and it'll tie into a little bit of global comparison. And then we'll talk about electric pickup trucks. As we all know, I'm sure most of us know the Pacifica and the Pacifica Hybrid are assembled in Windsor. Just to clarify that the Pacifica Hybrid that you see, if you're not too familiar with it, it's a plug-in hybrid, not so much of a regular hybrid. It only comes in a plug-in hybrid, not a full electric or a regular hybrid as an option. The batteries are supplied are assembled in Holland, Michigan, with parts from LG, from Korea and China. Although over the years, it's believed that the North American content of those batteries have been improving. And we'll talk more about battery manufacturing in a bit. There also has been some announcements from Chrysler and now Stellantis that they will invest $1.5 billion to add an additional platform, which is going to produce 1 plug-in hybrid and a full electric vehicle in Windsor. There's also new announcements from Stellantis as of this week that they're actually going to be ramping up all their product line with more electric vehicles from new platforms that they have will be available as soon as 2023. So all their vehicles, different sizes, will have more options, and it'll speed up the plans. They'll have large sedans that can do up to 800 kilometers on a charge, and they'll have different. It's going to be 4 different platforms, one for small, medium, large, and truck frame as well. That's not including the 2 platforms that Stellantis already has to offer, an EVMP and ECM platform. So there'll be more options that will be made in Windsor and other parts of Ontario, hopefully, and in North America. The sales of the Pacifica, Chrysler doesn't distinguish the difference between hybrid and the gas model. So sales of those of the hybrid has been estimated up until now, but we have evidence that the sales are much better than those lists have proven otherwise. As eventually, there's a big push in many organizations, including the government, to expand on EV manufacturing in Ontario or in Canada as a whole. For example, I'm sure you heard that the Windsor Essex Economic Development Corporation is pushing for battery manufacturing to happen in Windsor. That's just one example. Hopefully they succeed. With the new vehicles we'll be assembling in Windsor, we'll need more battery manufacturing because the Holland, Michigan plant, for example, hasn't been keeping up with demand. Right now, we know GM, for example, takes from that Holland, Michigan plant as well. GM is building 2 new battery plants as we speak in the US just to meet demand. So we'll need more supply for Chrysler, and Ford and GM are also going to be assembling more EVs in Ontario with their investments of 1.8 billion from Ford, 800 million from GM. Ford may even build their own battery plant is one of the plans, but moving forward, there's a lot more push to make more EVs in Ontario. We have other organizations such as Windsor Essex Regional Chamber of Commerce, the APMA, Automotive Parts Manufacturing Association. A lot of efforts towards advancing manufacturing here. Project Arrow is one, for example, where they're going to be building a fully Canadian prototype. It's going to be an SUV that's totally made from Canadian part suppliers. Hopefully that prototype leads into an actual production of this model. And without going into too much details, also the government's pushing towards increasing the supply chain from mining to parts supply, towards educating our skilled labor that we have lots of already in Windsor and Ontario. Also, there's a lot of, we got to get a lot of credit for the electrical industry. This supplies over 27,000 jobs in generating, maintaining the grid, anything to do with the electrical grid, basically. So we get much more to gain by supporting electricity as a fuel in Ontario. Just kind of going towards global EV manufacturing, or at least in comparison. China and Europe buys 83% of the electric vehicles up until the most recent numbers. So in 2020, 3.2 million EVs were sold in the world, which is an increase. That's an increase of 109% year to year. And the market share is going up. Now, market share globally is 4.2%. It's much higher in areas like Europe and China. But a lot of times when you see those numbers, sometimes you see lower numbers. In Canada, for example, where the most recent numbers is 3.89% of market share, of Canadians' market share is EVs. And that's including plug-in hybrid and battery electric vehicles. A lot of people conveniently leave out the plug-in hybrid sales and usually show a smaller number. Without getting into too much of the data, just one fun fact is Norway, for example, in March of 2021, 85% of vehicles sold were electric. That's a total of 13,000, so their market is smaller than Canada, but that's still a significant number regardless. In Europe, their market share is 11.4% in 2020, but Europe's market is quite big. It sold, for example, in February of this year, 115,000, where in Canada, for example, we sold just in 2019 over 50,000, just to give you a perspective. But the whole point of showing the fact that the world is buying a lot of electric cars, Canada will scale up to these levels sooner or later as well. So we do need to maintain our jobs here in Ontario. We have to maintain the market share of all cars sold by increasing on how many EVs we're manufacturing. The latest report actually shows that EVs can actually create jobs, and not so much a lot of the worries that people are worried that we'll lose jobs. If we mine the materials here, make the batteries here, supply as many parts as possible in Canada, we can actually maintain, if not create, more jobs. If I can share the screen, I'll just go on to the next subject, which is going to be pickup trucks and its significance on EVs. Before I get into this truck and a few other models, pickup trucks, electric pickup trucks to be exact, are significant in a couple of ways. For starters, we all know pickup trucks sell in huge volumes in North America. So if we can start electrifying that, we'll increase market shares and clean our air, if you will. Also, electric trucks will require bigger and better batteries and will require faster charging. The good news, those bigger, better batteries are available today. And so is the super fast charging options are available already. So a lot of people refer to EVs as the car of the future. In my opinion, they're here today. They're today's cars. So this will give us the confidence once they start selling EV trucks that buying our SUV or sedan or hatchback is definitely today's technology, and it'll suit our needs well. A lot of advantages by electrifying pickup trucks is, for starters, you'll get extra cargo space. As you can see here in the front, there's a trunk. All electric cars, most electric cars have trunks in the front. So you have extra cargo. This particular truck even has a pass-through where you can load up long lengths of lumber without sticking out past the pickup bed.
Pino, sorry, I don't think you're sharing your screen if you're showing something.
Oh, sorry. I have my slides up. Someone should share me.
There's a big green button at the bottom. It should say share screen. Does that work?
Yeah.
And then
I forget. I got to click. Okay. All right. I put up the screen too soon. I didn't see that. Okay. Thank you. Okay. And backtrack a bit. All right. So this first truck, I was showing the cargo in the front. So there's a trunk in the front and there's a pass-through where you can load up lumber. This is a Bollinger truck. This is a picture I'd taken myself in Michigan last year. So this is a prototype. Deliveries will start as soon as this June. Mind you, this truck is not a good example for us because it's out of most people's price range at 125,000 US. It's more of a low volume custom truck, but it shows what trucks can be by having different cargo options. Reason being is a electric motor is a quarter of the size as a gasoline motor when you compare horsepower to horsepower. Not to mention the motors have lots of torque. And this truck comes in an SUV as well, and a B1 as opposed to the Bollinger B2. So this is a heavy duty truck. This one of the torque capacity is not as high as some, but it can tow up to, not torque capacity, but towing capacity. It can tow up to 7,500 pounds. But it has a lot of suspension travel, 10 inches of suspension travel and up to 15 inches of height. The height is adjustable. If you're driving, you need more ground clearance, you can just raise it. It's a 2-motor setup for all-wheel drive. Before I get into the next model, trucks is very versatile by design. You can have a 1-motor truck. You can have a 2 or 3 or 4-motor truck. So this one is 2, one for the front and one for the rear motor. The Rivian model is probably going to be the next one that's going to be available, or one of the first ones, as soon as this summer. They're already started manufacturing the pre-production models. So this is the Rivian RT1. Rivian has been making a lot of news. It has a lot of investments from Amazon, investments from Ford, and many other companies. So Ford was going to make a vehicle, probably an SUV, off this platform. But once again, it has a lot of cargo options. The front has a trunk. There's an extra cargo compartment in between the bed and the cabin. In this case here, they installed an optional camping stove setup. But without that stove, you have lots of room for storing more storage, such as camping gear. And this one has a 4-motor option. They're going to start off with 4-motor option as the high-end models. Hopefully they offer cheaper models in the future. This one is about an $80,000 truck, 88 to 98 Canadian. It will be available in Canada. With 4 motors that allow independent motors, one for each wheel, with the drive shaft between the motor and the wheel. you can turn on a dime. You can have they call it tank turn. The passenger wheels turn in the opposite direction of the driver wheels. Therefore, you can turn without having to drive in a large turning radius. So lots of fun. This is a mid-sized truck.
Hey, Pino, just looking at the clock, I think we've got like 15 minutes for questions. So maybe we can pause it there, and
Okay.
if anyone has any more truck specific questions, they can ask. But yeah, I think the key message there is there's tons of trucks coming, and they're pretty amazing and capable, right?
These are more options. Just real quick, the Tesla one is going to be the more economical. Ford have an economical one, and there's others as well. Some of them being
yeah.
No problem.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, and that's something we get. You know, we get a lot of questions, obviously, about trucks. Everyone wants to know when trucks are coming.
It's pretty much
Thanks.
sums it up. Any questions? Yeah, we can answer those in questions for towing specs. Can go up to 35,000 pounds in some models of towing.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Pino. So yeah, I think we've already actually have a question in the chat that I think it came just directly to me. So I can start there, and then Claire, I think you were gonna put up some questions as well that other people have had, right? So just the one that came in, oh, I just lost it. Hold on. The one that came in to me was, what is the life expectancy of an EV? You all seem to have vehicles that are fairly new, and wonder if it'd be reasonable to expect a 10 to 14-year life from an EV. And we actually don't all have new EVs, but does anyone want to take that question?
I can take that quickly.
Sure.
Well, mine is 9 years old already.
Yeah.
I haven't repaired the battery, haven't repaired anything really. I did change this sway bar bushings just to keep it feeling like new. I had to change the antifreeze for the gasoline engine and fluids, but I suspect there shouldn't be any problems for years. I mean, battery warranty is 8 to 10 years, depending on the model. Does that sum up the question? Was there another part to the question? Or?
Yeah, I think, Michael, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, like I had mentioned earlier already, like my vehicle is already 9 years old as well, and with 250,000 kilometers on it, I have no issues with it to report. Like I never had any problems with it. I lost a minute percentage of charging capability, but I mean, that is to be expected. The battery will age at one point or another, but really no complaints whatsoever.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, yeah. EVs have been on the market since 2010, and they're showing remarkable resiliency over time. So yeah, that's a great question. We have another question that came in on the chat. Do you think the future of zero carbon vehicles lies in lithium-ion batteries or hydrogen fuel cell vehicles? And I can take this one to start with, because that's one we get a lot at EV Society. Is, you know, what do we feel about hydrogen? And you look at the market. I think the market is pretty clear at this point globally. There are tons and tons of EVs. I counted them just recently. There's over 60 different types of electric vehicle battery powered EVs you can buy today in the Canadian market, and there's more coming all the time. There's almost no hydrogen powered vehicles that you can buy on the market today. So it's pretty clear on that one. Now, hydrogen fuel cell does potentially have a role to play in transportation. So things like large long distance trucking. There's some talk about hydrogen being involved in shipping, even aviation. But in terms of like consumer vehicles, the cars that you and I, drive, it's that question has pretty much been answered at this point. It's very clear that it's going to be battery electric vehicles. Another question that came in, does the battery have a memory? Does it need to be fully charged before, does it need to be emptied before charging for best effect? So does anyone want to answer that question? Go ahead, Michael.
So to comment on that, I will plug my vehicle in wherever I have a chance. I'm privileged to have a charging station at work as well as at home, and wherever I go, I take advantage of it. And even if I'm just in a place for 15 or 20 minutes, I would not hesitate to just plug it in and just get a few extra kilometers out of it. There's no memory, so to speak. So it's not going to hurt your battery just plugging in it for 10 minutes, and then all of a sudden you're losing that kind of power off your main battery. So there's no reason whatsoever for that. The other thing, there was a question that I've seen come up there is about conserving energy, having to turn the heat down or to mute your radio and stuff like this. The one thing that I find really great with an electric vehicle is you can literally pre-start it in your driveway being plugged in, and you can heat the cabin up and the seats and defrost your windows, and you're not making any noise with that, and you're still using the energy from the grid. So that's a really great benefit. I have a neighbor with a truck that has a tendency to get up at 6:30 and have his truck idle for 15 minutes and waking everybody up in the neighborhood. So I think the electric vehicle would be much better. And then you can have it idle for half an hour in your driveway and then have it nice and toasty before you get in.
Yeah, that's a great point. Go ahead, Mary.
Can I also add that the Bolt is designed so that battery conditioning occurs, and what you want to do with that is you're trying to keep the battery at an optimal temperature. So if it's extremely cold or extremely warm, the battery will take care of itself to keep itself at its optimal temperature. You want to do that using the power from your house rather than using energy from the battery itself. So you often see recommendations to keep the car plugged in overnight to allow that conditioning to occur.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, it's always best to just, plug it in when you get home and just leave it plugged in. Yeah. We don't, there's a question about someone doesn't have a garage. Will setting up charging at home be difficult or expensive? That's a pretty common scenario. Electricians know how to install the chargers on a wall, even on a pedestal. So yeah, we know a lot of people, a lot of EV owners that don't have a garage and just have a charger kind of in their driveway. So yeah, that's definitely something that can be done. And installing a charger at home is fairly simple, and any electrician can do it. And in fact, even before you get the charger installed, all cars come with a regular 110-volt plug. So, and a lot of people can just get away with plugging it into a regular wall outlet. It's pretty slow, but charging overnight, you normally get as much energy as you need to drive for the day. So yeah, that's what a lot of people do. There's a question about safety ratings, yeah, generally EVs have really high safety ratings. Because they don't have a big engine in the front, that crumple zone tends to be a lot bigger. And some of the cars, like the Teslas, for example, don't even have anything. They have a big frunk, and they call it a big trunk in the front. And so it allows a greater crumple zone, and it adds some additional protection. So you'll see the safety ratings of electric cars tend to be higher in a lot of cases than the gasoline car equivalents. Looking at questions.
I love the question about running an EV on sunshine. What does that setup require or cost? That would be a really good one to answer. Sean, sorry for interrupting, because that's something I'm really interested in too. So I want to know what the answer is.
Yeah, in full disclosure, Michael works at a solar installer, and he's done that a lot, and he's done that at his house. So maybe I'll let him take the quick answer to that question.
Yeah, I do work at a local solar company. It's called Green Sun Rising, and we've been at this for the last 13 years now. So what happens is you actually take advantage of a system where you install a solar system on your roof, and you feed that energy into your house. And now you become your own best customer, so to speak, because the energy that's coming off your own roof from your solar system doesn't cost you anything, because once the system is installed and paid for, you don't have any additional costs anymore. So that cost is zero in 5 years, and 10 years, and 15 years. So you will never have to pay for the electricity again. There is a cost associated, obviously, with putting the system in. And in the last budget now, there's actually some talk about some money being available as far as close to $40,000, I believe the cost was, to actually get no interest loans for energy efficient upgrades to your home, and that also includes solar systems. So the solar system that I put in, actually, I was fortunate enough that I put it in about 6 years ago, and then electricity costs came up by about 50% over that period of time. So the original payback time was 10 years, and it ended up paying back in 5 years because the cost of electricity was rising so much. So I guess it was just good timing and on my point. And everybody just has to ask themselves is where the cost of electricity will go. Very likely not going down. They might stay the same, but very likely the cost will go up. So putting a solar system in will actually be an investment into your own energy future, because you basically have no more costs associated with the electricity going forward. And that's a really good point. So I'll be more than happy. Anybody has any questions, they can contact me directly through somehow, but we are a local company, Green Sun Rising, so you're more than welcome to give us a call.
Great, thanks, Michael. There is a question about range anxiety and how do you handle taking long trips, and is there do you have to do obsessive planning? That's gotten so much better, in recent years. I'm going to share my screen just for a really quick second here, which shows a map that's really common in the EV community. When you own an EV, it's called Plug Share, and it shows you where you can find a charging station. And there's already tons of places around Windsor that you can plug in and charge. But as you go closer to Toronto, London, and the orange ones are the fast chargers. So I have a Nissan Leaf, which is really a 200 or so kilometer range car. It's not like a long distance car. So we tend not to use it for long distance traveling. We also have a Pacifica hybrid as well. But I have driven it to Toronto quite a few times, and not an issue at all. I do stop a couple times for a bathroom break and a snack or something like that, and I plug in while I'm stopped, and then that by the time I'm done and I'm ready to go, I've got a good enough charge to keep me going. So yeah, range has become a lot less of an issue than it used to be, and especially with the new cars out now, they've got longer ranges. So you can go on longer trips. They charge really fast, so if you do need to stop and charge them, then it's not an issue. But most of the time you're just charging at home. If you're not going on a long trip, you don't really have to worry about finding a place to charge.
I'll just add that I took my Bolt down to Dayton, Ohio for a weekend trip. And along the way, I found General Motors dealers along the way who allowed me to charge for free. So the cost of the trip, essentially, other than the hotel bill for the weekend, was zero. Now, whether they're still doing that or not, I don't know. I don't know if they figure that might not be the best thing, but I think the benefit to them is that folks do stop buying a free salesperson in exchange for a free charge on your car. And everybody was awesome on the way down there. So that's always an option as well. Sometimes you can get away with not paying anything to get your car charged.
Yeah. Also, a lot of hotels have put in chargers as well. So if you go to a hotel, you can just charge up, and there's never any cost to charge at a hotel if you're staying there. There's a question about, do you foresee the province charging a price to use the chargers, and are the chargers free? And actually, no, most of them are not free. The province actually doesn't own any of the chargers. I shouldn't say that. They probably own some chargers, but all of the fast chargers kind of along like the highways or located near the 400 highways they're public chargers owned by private companies, and they charge a fee. So there's a fee to use them. So it's always more expensive to charge, at a public charger as opposed to charging at your own house. But they're there, and you can use them if you need to, which is nice. But yeah, they're not free today. But they're still convenient and easy to use. Let's see. We talked about safety. Government incentives was another question that came up. There is a federal incentive right now, $5,000 incentive on all new electric vehicles. Ontario, there's a private incentive Ontario for used electric vehicles as well, a $2,000 incentive for used EVs, and EV Society can help with that, point you in the right place for that. But I'm not hearing, none of us really heard of any, planned change to those incentives anytime soon. I think that, the expectation generally is that the price of EVs will come down over time as supply and demand and kind of market forces come together. EVs are actually easier to make than a gasoline car for the manufacturers. It's just about the battery supply and the supply chain being ready for them so that the cost will come down. So I don't hope, the hope is incentives won't be needed for too much longer. But I don't think, unless there's a big change in the Ontario government, I'm not expecting incentives in Ontario to change anytime soon. A question, Claire, I'm seeing it's 8 o'clock. Are we okay to continue for a few more minutes here?
Yeah, I think maybe, I don't know, maybe this last question, I think there's one more in there. I'm feeding in questions that we received through the survey. So these aren't my questions, but they're other folks' questions. So if you want to, whatever cleanup is in there, and if there are any last questions, enter them in the chat now, and we can address them, and then we'll wrap it up.
Okay, great. So what happens if there's a power outage and you can't charge? Does anyone want to take this question?
I can take that.
Go ahead, Pino.
I'll give you an example. I lost power in my house for 3 days. Now I do drive plug-in hybrids. No reason why I won't replace at least one of them with a full electric, but of course the outage was just in my house. We still did majority of our driving on electricity. There's public charges. We used a little bit when convenient. And if it was a fully electric car, I would have, any modern electric car would have 300, 400, 500 kilometers of range anyhow. So unless the power outage is very long time, if it's like all of the city, it shouldn't be an issue. There was a power outage in Texas we all know of. Most of the EV drivers did okay. They charged up ahead of time of the storm coming, and they were actually using the power to stay warm either in their car or even power auxiliary devices in their homes, whether it be cooking or the odd heat. Those are some examples. I mean, the power outages, if the power is out, you're probably not pumping gas either, but the batteries are getting as big as a gas tank, if you will. So it's probably the same comparison. Is there anything I missed there, anyone?
No, that's good. And Kelly asked if you can use a generator if you're desperate. You can use any power source to power an EV if it's got enough power. So a generator would work, although that would be probably the last thing you would ever want to charge your electric car. But yes, if you were desperate, you theoretically could do that. And then Claire asked, does Windsor's building code require new houses to build with future EVs in mind? Does anyone want to answer this question? I don't feel like Claire or Karina might be able to answer this one.
Yeah, maybe I left this for Karina. Yeah, go ahead, Pino.
Was I going to answer that?
Yeah, sure.
I can add to it at least. A building code, as far as I understand it, is more of because the mayor was talking about this, for example, been pushing some awareness on the issue. It's more of an Ontario requirement. It was in the Ontario building code and it was removed. It's still highly recommended to at least rough in to make it easier in the future. That's what the mayor of Windsor was trying to push. And the city of Windsor thought it was too complex. Some cities do it, I think, as a bylaw as opposed to building code. Like I said, building code, I think, is more of an Ontario jurisdiction, but maybe Michael can expand on that.
Yeah, I can just really briefly point out on that one. And the problem with these chargers is that you do have to run a 240 volt wire from your main panel out into a garage. And we run across this all the time, even with the solar, is retrofitting in an existing building is sometimes so hard because the electrical panel is typically on the wrong side of the house from where the garage is. And there's finished ceilings and everything else, and it becomes quite costly after a while. So it will cost you a few $1,000s sometimes to just get the power into the garage from your breaker, where if they would do a rough-in on a new building, all you have to do is supply a conduit into the rough building, and the cost is probably $20 or $30 at that point. And the future owner can then decide to just pull a wire through that conduit, and it's really no issue anymore. So not having an EV plug assembled or having it actually available is not a good practice. So any home builder or anybody who's actually building a house should automatically consider that anyway, just because of the simple fact that it is so expensive in some instances to do it afterwards.
Yeah, my just to add on to that, my parents live out in Vancouver and they live in a condo, and they're now trying to figure out how to retrofit 5 floors of underground parking for electric vehicles, and yeah, they can't. That the cost is outrageous. So yeah, if you're considering a new build, wire in a plug, even if you don't have a electric vehicle. I think that's a really great piece of advice going forward. And then my other comment on electric vehicles is when I was out in Vancouver, I was actually looking for a new vehicle a couple of years ago, and I drove. There's so many used Leafs out there, and they had just great range. Oh, I was so excited. I came back to Windsor and I called the Nissan dealership and I asked if they had any used Leafs, and there was just silence on the phone. And eventually she came back with, we don't lease used vehicles, we sell them, or something like that. And I said, no, not lease, Leaf, the Leaf. And she said, oh no, we don't sell those. So that was my experience trying to look at vehicles. I'd be curious, in the chat, there's a very last comment from all of you. Lisa's trying to decide on, Bolt, Volt, Tesla, Kia, VW. The options are just growing. Do you have any last minute, each one of you, a last minute comment on what you would decide on, other than perhaps investing in GM and Volkswagen right now? Because
I bought mine in 2019, and when I was shopping for mine, there were almost none of those brands available in the Windsor Essex region, and that's partially why I ended up with the Bolt. I actually managed to buy a Bolt off the lot. I couldn't believe it. There were several around the county that were available. Volts with a V are not available anymore. Only the Bolt is available from Chevrolet. I was actually, I have a really quick, funny little story, because I went into one dealership and asked for their model of electric car, and they weren't selling them. And then the guy said, can I interest you in some other vehicles that we have here? And I said, no, I don't want a nice car. I want an electric car. Thanks very much. Goodbye.
If I can add to that, take a Kia for a test drive. They're in stock today. The Bolts are in stock. There's a new Bolt coming out, model 2022 this July-ish. July in the States, maybe a little longer in Canada, but and the price is cheaper, starting 22 model year. So I suppose you can get a cheaper price on the new one. To be the Bolt and the Bolt EUV being bigger, more legroom, more height. It'd be like a mini SUV, and the Bolt still being available as a hatchback. And the price is going down considerably, about $6,000. So if you're buying a 2021, make sure you get a discount on that as well. Any electric vehicle, they're all great models that you're listing there. Can't go wrong with either of them.
Can I just add something real quickly to that? Is I think what you should do is in the future, and people have to consider this, when you're buying an electric vehicle, you really should do your homework first of all to see how excessively you're using it, because you're paying for the capacity of the vehicle. So it's nice to have a vehicle that drives 600 kilometers on one charge, but if you're only commuting 80 kilometers a day, you never have to plug your vehicle in for the whole week, and you're paying for that battery, driving it around all week, and the extra expense and everything else. So you could probably save yourself a lot of money sometimes to say, realistically, yes, I only drive maybe 100 kilometers, so I'm looking at something that might have a 200 kilometer range to cover myself really well, and buy an electric vehicle that's much more affordable at that point. And if you do want to go to Florida that one time a year, you just rent the biggest Cadillac you can find and drive down there for the week, enjoy yourself, and then come back and bring it back to the rental company and drive your electric vehicle the rest of the year. So really doing your homework on what you want is like, don't buy the biggest and most expensive one and with the biggest range, and just never use it.
Yeah, great, Michael. Yeah, and just one, the very last comment for me is there are a lot more used EVs hitting the market now. So a used EV can be a really affordable way to get electric, especially for like a second car, you know, or if you don't want to buy new. They can be really affordable, and they continue to be, you know, cheap to operate and cheap to fuel and all that stuff. So it can be a great way. They can be hard to find locally, but there are dedicated used EV dealers that will, you know, are happy to go bend over backwards to, you know, send an EV across the province if they need to. So again, you know, EV Society, we can help with stuff like that. I put my email in the chat, so if anyone has any questions after this, feel free to reach out.
Excellent. So I'm just going to jump in. I want to thank everybody so much for your wonderful, I guess, insight into the world of an EV owner. I have had a chance to drive a couple EVs. I love them. I think Mary said about their fun. I've had to catch myself because there's no sound. You don't hear that engine revving. It's easy to get to pretty significant speeds on the expressway before you realize that you are at that speed. So I figure when I actually do get my first vehicle, I'm giving myself about a month before I get a ticket, because they are, and you don't hear it. You don't have any of those other ideas that, you know, you're having that fun while you're driving.
Cruise
And the
control
other
is a wonderful thing.
yes. And the other thing that I look forward to when I finally get my EV vehicle is to be able to plug it into my house in the middle of the winter and not have to stop at a gas station. I hate the cold, and I look forward to the day I don't have to stand outside for 10 minutes pumping gas. So those are my two big things that I really want to, you know, I look forward to in my near future. So again, thank you guys for all your information. Claire, I don't know if you want to add anything to finish this off.
No, I agree. Thank you so much. And thanks to everybody who came. Don't forget, take a quick screenshot if you haven't already and upload it to the Goose Chase app. We're so pleased you could join us, and we hope we can do this again sometime soon. Thanks, everybody. Thanks so much, Pino, Sean, Michael, Mary. Bye.
And I guess one more thing I'd like to add, sorry, Claire, just thinking we are recording this and we will be able to share it. So if you have a friend that's thinking about an EV and you're like, oh, maybe they should have attended, we'll be able to share that with you as well.
Thank you.
Great.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Good night.